Hello everyone. Welcome to a how-to on technical setup of live streaming production. This is going to be a fun one. I know you guys have probably been grueling through a lot of this day, but this should be one of your lighter, better, more exciting ones. We're going to go over how cameras, encoding, bandwidth, CDNs, social overlays, how to make this stuff interesting, how to make it more fun, mostly how not to screw it up, and we'll see what we can do together. Who am I? I am Rob Roskin. I'm the Senior Manager of Video Operations and Emerging Technologies at MTV Networks. I've been there for a long time, since we had modems. We used to do about 5 events a year. We started out, it was the BET Awards, Nickelodeon's Kids' Choice Awards, the MTV Video Music Awards, things like that. Even the MTV Movie Awards, when we started, were taped. They weren't even live, so we didn't live stream them. Obviously, a lot has changed since about 2003 is really when things started to pick up. We're doing 20 to 50 events per year. I expect that to double. Other people expect that to triple or quadruple. And just for the last slide, MTV Networks is including MTV, VH1, CMT logo makes up our music group, Comedy Central, Spike and Game Trailers, our entertainment group, and Nickelodeon, Nick Jr., etc. is our kids and family group. On top of that, we have Paramount, BET, and all of our internal events. So it's a lot of stuff from a lot of different places coming at us. We're going to start with cameras, because they're really important, and you can't make the video look good when you have garbage coming in. There are 3 types of cameras that I generally classify for use with live streaming. There's a static, what we call a lipstick camera, because it kind of looks like the size of a thing of lipstick, and it's very light. It doesn't do any crazy zooming or any magic, but if you need to affix a camera somewhere, right here on this drape, you obviously couldn't hire a camera crew and put them on this drape, but you could take a little camera, tape it to this, have one little cable coming out, and get your show off the ground. The example I have here is the red carpet entrance, because when people come out of the limos, they always do it in the same spot. You don't need to move around or zoom in and out. You know where your action's going to be, and you can really focus there and make that your good experience. Moving up from there, when you have a little more money and a little more stuff to look at, you can get a robotic camera. They basically look like this, and they turn, and they do all their crazy stuff. They have tremendous zoom. We used to get people in the water from the MTV Beach House, which was thousands of feet away. I mean, it was a half-mile maybe, something like that. It was a long, long shot, but we could really hit people with the zoom on these things. They're also good for green rooms, things like that, where you don't know exactly where your action's going to be, and again, you can't have an entire ENG crew sitting there taking up all that space. Sometimes it's again on a wall, maybe a hallway cam, and the fire warden wouldn't let you use an ENG crew in that hallway because they need to keep it clear. So it's almost the same thing. We would just affix a camera to a spot on the wall and just move the camera around ourselves back at the control room. That really opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And then finally, when you have the ability and the money and you have stuff you really want to cover, you can go get a whole crew. You get your sound guy and your camera guy, and they go out and they film stuff, and it looks great. I mean, obviously the lens on these cameras goes up. The lipstick cameras, this tiny little lens. The robotics are like that, and then the ENG crews have obviously good high-end cameras, the kind you're used to seeing. So that's kind of the order, and they're all good at certain times, and sometimes you can't use any of them, or you can only use a static camera. Some tips for all these cameras we're talking about. Make sure that the camera does not face a light source. Meaning, as I look at you guys right now, I'm pretty blinded by these lights. I'm not complaining, I'm just blinded. And so, if I was trying to film someone, for example, we were at the Kids' Choice Awards, and Fergie is walking out of this tunnel for her Black Eyed Peas song. So she comes out of the tunnel, and the whole week we're there, we're testing this, we have a camera on the stage, we put it there just to catch her coming out of this tunnel. It's a great shot. She comes up and around, and by the time she's on stage, it's as if we had a camera guy looking up at her like this. Well, the day before the show, the lighting guys decided there wasn't enough light on the stage, and they put a big light in that tunnel to film the stage. So when our camera went to go look at Fergie, we actually saw the outside of a shadow that one could think was Fergie and a bright white light. And that became our new shot. I mean, that we couldn't do anything about it. We didn't have the right to tell the lighting guy no. So we had to figure out what to do about that. And whenever you can avoid that, on that one it was dropped on us, but you gotta move it, you gotta fix it, and make sure you're not planning for shots. Make sure when you're doing all this work, the lighting guy is there, or at least has a cursory knowledge of some of the angles that you're gonna pick, because you can ruin a lot of really good shots that way. Testing cameras outside, do it at the time of day that the show will take place. If you're filming at 4, don't test it 2. I know you know this, the sun moves, and it creates shadows, and those shadows really screw up your video, and can screw up a lot of other things as well. If you're testing a carpet or any outside show, make sure you're doing it at the right time, and then if you do have really bad shadows, make sure you can either get a fill light or something else in there to take that over. We've made this mistake more than once, and I hope you don't make that mistake. Don't affix cameras where bass will cause vibrations. We were doing the Video Music Awards at Radio City Music Hall in New York, and there was this long pipe that ran across the whole house, and it was really convenient because we could put all our cameras on it. And we just get a little clamp and put the camera there, and it looked great, and we could zoom in and out. We could get the crowd, we could get the stage, we could even get the backstage on some of them. And then as soon as they started sound checking, our cameras were doing this. Because when the bass, the vibration itself is very small, but when you're zoomed in on one of these robotic cameras, it really adds up, and you see it was unusable, the video that we were getting back. So make sure you either pad your cameras or move them. Just try to be aware of bass in venues and the fact that it'll ruin your shots. Also, pan-tilt zoom cameras, the robotic ones we were talking about, take a lot of cabling. As of the writing of this, there were 3 cables. Some of the newer ones can do it with 2. But if you're using union guides in a house, and we'll get to this later, it's going to add a lot of cost. If you're running 1 wire or 3 to 8 different cameras all across your whole venue, it's significantly different cost structure. So stay cognizant of that. And don't use prosumer instead of professional equipment. There's some little gotchas that can come up. We were doing our CIO's town hall, and we had tested with this one camera, and everybody was happy with it, but then we got an even better camera that came in. So we put that camera in, and it screwed up how the video looked. There was like extra black trim around it, and everybody noticed it, and it was some big annoying thing. We'll get to this a little bit later too, but if we had just left it working the way that everybody was happy, we would have been better off. And we tried to kind of overdo it and say, well, we know this camera looks better. So use professional instead of prosumer whenever you can, because there's some little gotchas that you won't see. There's things called overscan and some other long words that are very complicated, but the professional stuff looks out for that, and the prosumer stuff does not. The prosumer stuff assumes you're going to be watching it on a home television, things like that. So that covers cameras, and that will get us into the encoders. We now have video. We just need to do something with it. Speaking of video and needing to do things with it, the first thing we have to do is time code the video. What is time code? Time code basically puts a stamp on each frame of video as it's going out. And it says, you are the 24th frame of the 6th second of video. And so no matter where your encoders are or how many of them you have, they all know what happened at the 24th frame at the 6th second of video. This synchronization is important because we have multiple streams of the same video going out. We have a 400 bit rate, we have an 800, we have a 1200, we have a 1700, and these all need to be going out synchronized. And so what timecode does is allows us to synchronize all this video as it's leaving the encoder. It also allows us to switch so that as we go up and down, we know that we're not time traveling, that we're not, oh, well, you were on encoder 2 and that one ran 30 seconds behind, so I'm not surprised that your video, that when you went to a better quality, you had to rewatch the last 30 seconds, things like that. And if you're using the Cisco's, I guess Cisco now, they have these little Miranda devices that will attach to your timecode clock, and will keep that all in sync for you. It's relatively easy. It's just something that you really need to do, and that, it's kind of easy when 3 encoders are sitting next to each other, but when you're trying to figure out, well, how that show that's out there in LA, how are we going to synchronize that to the one going on in New York? Stuff like this becomes very important. For audio, we keep each rendition at the same audio bitrate. Our 400K is 96 audio. Our 3.5 meg is 96 audio. Because when you switch audio in the middle, there's a little click or a pop sound that you hear every time the audio switches. I'm speaking specifically about flash in this bullet item, but it could exist in other places. And the 96 that we do use is called HE1. So when they came out with AAC, they have low complexity, which is LC, and that's kind of the one that came out when the spec came out. And then HE1 does some extra super compression stuff to, at the end of the day, you can hear things that sound like 128 MP3 or 128 AAC at 96 AAC. So it knocks out about 30 bits, which on the low end can be big for us sometimes. And HE2 is a voice-only codec. So if you're literally only doing talking heads, you can go ahead and use HE2 at like 48K and get the equivalent of a 128 AAC out of that. It's a really good sounding thing. But if you're like us, most of your talking heads will then play a video, and the video just destroys any of the talking head audio video settings that you gave it. So you have to be wary of people rolling in video as well. Choosing bit rates for flash. I say to watch out for the 512K users and the 768K users. These are the people whose internet bandwidth maxes out at 512K down or 768 down. We used to have a 450K rendition in our on-demand, and we lowered that to 400K because we found that a lot of people with the 512 can't play a 450, but they could play a 400. And also, we found that the people trying to watch a 750 from a 768 really couldn't watch it, but that 700 seemed to be okay for them. So we've made some differences looking at how the external users are buying their bandwidth, and then looking at stats like that to kind of figure out that. No more than 2 times the previous bit rate. Don't go from 500K to 1500K in your streams. You have to step these things up, because while people don't notice them, maybe the people in this room are better at noticing these things, but the general public's pretty bad at noticing video and pretty good at noticing audio problems. If you step this up right, you can kind of mask it from them. Nobody's really watching. They're still watching the show instead of watching the pixelation or interpolation, all that kind of stuff. So we go from 400 to 800, for example, just to kind of kick people up. But we wouldn't go from 800 to 1600 because too many people have that. Too many people's bandwidth limit is going to be in that range. So we would go 800 to 1200 to 1600 or something like that, and just kind of step it up a little bit. We think that it's important, and believe me, when you go from like 400 to 2 meg or something, people get so busy watching how the video is switching that they stop watching the show that they're watching. So just keep that in mind when you're building out your rendition charts. For the high end, we go really high. I know a lot of places don't want to go this high yet, or if they do, they want to do it for 1080p and some of that. But we'll either do a 3 meg or a 3500K stream for our 720p encode. It's a lot, but it looks really good. When we did Hope for Haiti, we had a lot of people watching it in their office, and Hope for Haiti was the thing when the Haiti earthquake came, and it was kind of like a show to raise money for it. But we had it on all of our channels, and we had it on the internet. And executives were sending us messages that said, this looks so much better on my computer than it does on the television, which is, I think, why we're all here and the point of a lot of this, that I can't believe it. These guys had, they paid how much for their HD set, and they ended up watching it on their laptop. And so when you can do stuff like that and make a really nice encode, people really enjoy it, especially non-technical people. Lastly, let's say to use lower bit rates internationally. We just did the European Music Awards on Sunday, and the amount of markets and the different places that you can hit makes it difficult to have a one-size-fits-all bandwidth stack, but if you do, make sure that it's a little bit lower. For example, on the above point, we ended up going with a 3 meg rendition for our 720p instead of a 3.5, just because we needed to kind of cut down some of these bits. So keep that in mind as well. All right, choosing bit rates for mobile. It's a little bit different than choosing bit rates for flash, but Don't worry too much about resolution. I've had so many executives tell me how awesome everything looks on the iPad that turned out to just be a relatively low encode. Something if I had showed them that on their desktop, they would have said, it looks okay, I'm not really sure. That same exact stream on their iPad, they love it. It looks great, they can't wait to have the next show so they can see video looking that good again. It's not that I'm doing anything magical. It just looks better there, so don't go nuts trying to build a 720p for the iPad or you know, even a 540p for the iPhone. You don't have to do it. It looks good where it is. Obviously, if you disagree with that, go ahead and make whatever you want. But in our testing, we found that the resolution doesn't really matter. Keep a few renditions in the 3G range. If you're in LA, New York, or San Francisco, and you're on AT&T, you're probably pretty familiar with this problem, but you're coasting along fine at like 700K, and then you get a good 30, 40 seconds of audio only, and then you go back up to like, let's say 300K. So we started making 150s, we have a 250, a 400, and then to the next point, if they're not on 3G, make one that just completely blows it out for all your Wi-Fi customers, because there's a lot of people that are sitting back watching this stuff in their house just because they're too lazy to get the remote, so they decided to watch it on their iPad or something like that. You'd be surprised how many people there are. Hit Android and iOS in the same profile. I don't want to get too technical, but you can encode things once and package them differently. So a lot of times when you go to buy encoders or to do a lot of this encode work with a vendor, you'll end up paying per stream or paying per encoder. And there's ways that you can cut down on some of that by encoding that thing once and then just giving it Apple packaging or giving it Android packaging or giving it Flash packaging or however you want to do it. And it'll save some of your costs in your production itself. And if international, don't aim for Symbian. It might not need to be said anymore, but Android and iPhone have really taken off in Europe as well, and we're getting a lot of traction there, and what we see over here is now perceived to be what they see over there. So that one was actually thrown in by my international guys. So they found that it was pretty important. Balancing streams across encoders. When you have a stack of like 8 bit rates, don't put the first 4 on the first encoder and the next 4 on the next encoder. You need to balance these things out because you're going to run into encoding issues. You can end up having the CPU, obviously it could be completely maxed out if you put the 35 and the 22 on the same encoder. That's about all that's going to fit there. But with a little bit of massaging and some like trial and error and all of those kind of things, you can get pretty good. Usually with 2 encoders, we can hit stuff if we do it right. Otherwise, we would need a third. So just stay cognizant of that. Keyframes, what they are. Keyframes are a frame of video that has all of the video in it. So if you look at a film strip, each one of those pictures on the film strip is what we would call a keyframe. It has all of the information about the video that's in it. There's nothing that you're going to see when the projector hits that piece that you can't see right there. On the internet, we don't always do it that way. If you're watching a kid play with a ball, and between frame 1 and frame 2, nothing is moved except the ball moved 1 pixel, we're not going to redraw that whole frame like a film strip, so you can't watch it like a picture book. What we will do is say, the ball moved 1 pixel. So the first frame has all the information, the boy, the background, the ball, all this stuff. The second frame just says, move ball 1 pixel. So the amount of bandwidth needed for that keyframe is this. The amount of bandwidth needed for what's called the B frame that just has that little bit of what changed is like that. And you can do a lot of encoding efficiencies along B frames and knowing that your profile is going to kind of spike and then go back down and spike. Well, keyframes and synchronization are important because that's when the video switches. If you're watching the 400 and you should be watching the 800 and it's all ready to switch you up and everything's good, then we just wait for a keyframe and you get switched. The why to this is because move the ball 1 pixel, if that's the only information that you have, you don't know anything about the rest, so you can't switch there. I mean, you can, but sometimes you see those green screens and you see something move and then a few seconds later everything clicks in and it's good. That's this problem, if you will. It's switching when you're not in a keyframe. And that's why we wait. So you can usually set them to the second. We do 3 seconds. We think we've done a lot of testing with it, and we're happy with 3 seconds. But there's certainly plenty of other things that you could go ahead and do. 10 seconds seems like a lot. It's a lot to wait. Let's say that you come in on second 2 and you have to wait for 8 seconds for the video to hit a keyframe. You're probably going to end up losing some users or just have some pretty bad experiences. If you do them too quickly, you're not gaining a lot of the bandwidth advantages of not having keyframes. So we found 3 seconds. Some people do 2, some people do 5. It just depends how your setup is. But it's definitely something that you should keep in mind. And while it looks like just another checkbox on a long list of technical things on an encoder, this is one of the really important ones. Excuse me. All right, naming conventions. Naming conventions, I say they're crucial for multi-bit rate streaming. I think I should just say that they're crucial. I'm not sure that I've done an event recently where I was like, man, I didn't even need that naming convention. Everybody would have known what I was talking about. Because the problem is that you have the marketing group, and the marketing group has the Burger King camera, and the staging group has the house camera, the tech group has camera 1, and then there's another group with another name for this thing. This is all the same camera. But when you get an email from marketing who wants to know when the Burger King camera will be ready, you have to pull out your secret decoder ring, figure out what the marketing camera is, depending on who you are and who you need to talk to, and basically send an email every 5 minutes once you're done figuring out what you need to know. Also, people start to try to memorize this stuff. But you're only on set for like 5 days, a week, however long you're on the show for. You don't really have time to memorize it correctly. So sometimes people are like, oh, Burger King, yeah, that's camera 2. That doesn't work. Because then people, they were trying and they meant it right, but they just screwed up half your show because the camera's in the wrong place and it's going to cost another 10 grand to have it moved. We figure out the show, and then we figure out the naming convention. I mean, it's literally step 2. It's part of the pre-planning, because we can't have marketing and tech and stage all calling it different things. We all have to agree on one thing, and we have to do it quick. If you take one thing away from this show, that should be it. The naming convention will save your life in a big, complicated show when things aren't going well and it's the day before, and people are running around. You need naming conventions. Let me walk you through the one that I have here. It's VMA 2011, it's the bottom thing, underscore greenroom flash underscore 2200. It's slightly cryptic. I don't have an infinite amount of characters to work with, but VMA 2011 is the Video Music Awards from 2011. I now know what event we're talking about. Green room is one of the cameras that we have set up in the green room, and the green room flash means that I'm using this bitrate, whatever this rendition is, I'm using for my flash stack, and 2200 is the bitrate. So I'm doing a 2.2 meg stream of the green room in flash at the VMAs just from looking at that bullet point. And once your groups can operate that way, it'll make a significant difference in kind of the workflow and the production itself. I should add, the CDN of your choice might have specific naming needs. The one below, in all honesty, is an Akamai formatted one. There's no need for it to be that. You could do it other ways, especially if your CDN has other specific needs. And just to really drill it home, stream1.flv doesn't mean anything to anybody. There's too much stuff going on. People are too busy. Nobody had enough time to know that stream1.flv magically means these 5 other things. So keep this in mind, please. All right, speaking of bandwidth and CDNs, let's move on to that. All right, bandwidth, big things, important things. Watch ping times, which is known as latency, just as much as speed. You could have a 100 meg pipe that I just need to use this much of, but I can't because it's too slow. When you're sending stuff from an encoder to, let's hope, a CDN, that latency can be a real problem. If it takes more than 1/10 of a second to get your video to the encoder, you're probably not going to have a good show unless you're doing about a 300 or 400K stream, and that's it. As that number goes down below, let's say 50, you could do a 5 meg stream, no problem. So even just doubling that number or watching that latency. And when you do a ping space google.com and hit enter, you'll see how long it took to get there. And if you start pinging things that are further away geographically, for example, you guys can argue with me because I'm East Coast and you're West Coast, but I'd say it's about 100 milliseconds across the country, 75 to 100, something like that. Maybe your numbers are different, but that's what I found. And that's too much. So if let's say pick Akamai again, if I'm using an Akamai entry point that's in LA and I'm doing my show in New York, that show's not going to go so well. So as the encoding guy, I need to make sure that I either move around my entry points or make new ones in other places. So we've now done so many shows in LA that we have New York and LA entry points separate. And then when we go to make the show, one of the questions on the questionnaire is, where is this located? And whichever one it's located closer to, we'll move around so that we can hit that. Let's see. I guess that kind of is number 2 with the ingest point, regardless of whether they call it an entry point or whatever it is. This matters a little bit less when you're using your own private network. So if any of you guys are big banks, you might not have this issue. But if you're going across the public internet, just do yourself a favor. It takes 5 minutes probably, and just make sure that you're hitting the closest place to your encoder. And maybe that's not physically the closest place. An encoder on the AT&T network, when you're on the AT&T network, might be network closer than something that's physically closer in the data center. Leave overhead for TCP/IP. This is very important. 30% probably sounds like a lot to those of you who know, but if I tell you 30 and you leave 15, then that's better than me telling you 15 and you leaving 5. And what this really means is that if you have a 1 meg pipe that is successfully working at 1 meg, don't make a 1 meg stream because you haven't left any room for all the overhead and slowness and all these other things that TCP/IP brings in. I say 30%. I guess you'd make a 700K stream there. You could probably get away with an 800K on a 1 meg pipe. But don't do a 950 on a 1 meg pipe is kind of our point. Don't push it so close where you're like, well, what could possibly go wrong? Because you always know as soon as you say that, that's the thing that's going to go wrong. And it might not be this show, but once you make that decision, it's not good. Let me just leave it there. Bandwidth is used more heavily when there's motion. Some of that is the thing I was talking about with the ball moving 1 pixel needs a lot less bandwidth because there's a lot less information to be sent. And some of that is just optimizations of the encoders that we have now. But don't test with a slate if you're filming a concert. The meaning of this is that, let's say you have a 3 meg pipe and you're at a music venue and you've been testing with the little slate that you guys built. And all day, everything's been working great. And then when the concert starts, for some reason, the bandwidth's having trouble. Well, that some reason is probably that you should have tested with more motion. I mean, even waving your hand in front of a camera is enough. It doesn't have to go crazy. You don't need to go buy confetti just to test this. But don't use a picture or a slate when you're actually going to do something with motion. You'll be a lot closer to the truth if you're literally just filming an interview or a talking head. CDNs. I always put this at the top. Live streaming is difficult, and you should use a CDN unless you really, really know what you're doing. They take care of a lot of stuff, and they bring a lot of extras that you might not need right now, but you might need later. If I told you in 2005 to go make a stream at a bank, you would just set up a streaming server and stream it across the internal network. Now there's security issues. So now either you become the guy in charge of all that security issues and all that performance and all that, or you toss it over the fence to somebody else and let them use all their expertise on it. I prefer the latter. Obviously on the second bullet point here, we talk about cloud encoding versus CDN, and we could spend an entire presentation session just on that topic, but you should look at both. You should decide how involved in this you want to get. You don't have to send it all over the fence, but you should figure out where that line is. Both are more and more regularly available now. As time goes on, the cloud's getting stronger, CDN's getting stronger. It's worth another look. Security, the CDNs do things to help secure your stream that are relatively lightweight and don't require too much on your end. Swift hashing is locking down your videos to your player. So if I take a Beyonce video from MTV.com and try to play it in my website's player, it's not going to work. I would need to go either get a copy of the MTV player or talk to them and have them authorize my player for me to use that Beyonce video. Token auth will actually make the URLs themselves expire. So we used to have this problem. A new album would come out, and then 5 minutes after the, I don't know, new Britney Spears album came out, there were links across all the Britney Spears message boards with links right back to MTV's video of it. Not the ads, not our player, not our website, just the video. So you'd go somewhere, you'd click a button, you'd watch a video, and you were done. It was very YouTube-ish. And obviously, we didn't like that because we weren't making any of the ad money, we were just spending all the bandwidth money. So we implemented token auth, and then when you put that URL in that message board for everybody to see, it only works for like 8 minutes. You know, and you can set how long it would work for. It could work for a day, it could work for a minute, but that helped us cut down on a lot of our piracy and things like that. And then finally, RTMPE and HTTPS are good encryption technology. The E in RTMPE is just encrypted RTMP, which is a flash standard. And these are to make sure nobody's actually watching the stream like in the middle, and encrypts it so that it needs to be decrypted somewhere and it's not just in the open. These are all used in conjunction with one another. These are all good things. They all work very well. And if you are getting pressure about security, I would suggest looking into one or all three of them. Lastly, geographic dispersion, as we talked about, being close to where you're going into your CDN is very important, especially if you're leaving the country or going between any countries. In South America, for example, most of the countries don't talk to each other internet-wise. I know this sounds dumb, but it's true. So if you want to go from Brazil to Argentina, you go from Brazil to Dallas and Dallas to Argentina. And you have to be careful about things like that. Because if you're doing a show down there, that's a very good thing to know. So CDNs will help you kind of get around some of these things. And you know, obviously the caching aspect is a no-brainer, but some of the geographic dispersion, if you have an audience that you didn't expect that pops up for in London or in Amsterdam, like we had for the game trailers guys, turned out 70% of their audience was international, and they didn't know that. So after we did the first one, we found out, wait, we really would have been completely screwed if we hadn't, you know, done things X, Y, and Z. We got lucky, we'd done them, but they really would have made a big difference, and the show would not have gone well for the majority of the audience. So if you're gonna have, if people that are gonna be either watching it or sending in content are geographically far away from you, there's a lot of other things you need to look into. All right, now we're gonna get onto the social networking overlays. It's one of the more fun parts of it. As you can see here, this is last year's Video Music Awards, and the little thing at the edge over there is a Share It First widget. These are actually called vidgets, V-I-D, because they go on top of the video, and apparently widgets go next to the video. So we have a Share It First widget there, and that is basically whenever something that our editorial team thought was important, they would pop up the Share It First widget, and you would go, I'm just gonna call them widgets, I have trouble saying widget that many times. They'd pop up the Share It First widget, and you could immediately share with your friends, like whatever that exciting moment was. Kanye, Taylor Swift got a lot of Share It Firsts on that. There's some search stuff over there. There's more things in the middle. On the bottom right here where it says video is the picture-in-picture. So you could line up where you were in the show in case you had drifted, or if you were watching both at the same time and things didn't seem right, you could pop up a picture-in-picture and see when the stream was here, what was here on television. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with these. They've really kind of blown out our ability to target socially. Of the 3 top shows, in terms of viewership from Nielsen ratings, this would not at all be the case. But the 3 top shows from social were Jersey Shore, SpongeBob, and The X Factor. And given how far that is from what the TV ratings were, this stuff is making a difference. At first, you might be like, it's a gimmick. Who needs it? It's not important. It's making a big difference for us across kids and music. As you can see by this Nickelodeon one, it's a lot harder when you're doing stuff with kids. You gotta watch out for all these extra rules. But there's polls and there's tweets right here, and the kids love that stuff. So we put them in year after year, and they eat them up. We've even had load issues, just because it was so popular we didn't expect it. But things to do with the widgets, I put a few out there. The boss view is something they did for the Olympics that I liked, where you would hit a button and it looked like you were working on a spreadsheet, and then you hit another button and like the audio would come back and the video would be playing behind it and all that kind of stuff. so he couldn't get caught. I always thought it'd be cool to have a mini game going on during an award show, so if you got bored, you could like get SpongeBob out of the box or something, or like play Worm or something in one of these little boxes. Just anything to keep you on the page. That's really the point of this, you know. Keep them engaged, keep them on the page, keep them smiling. Tweets help and chat helps because you feel a little more interactive. You know, if you're a really huge Britney Spears fan, this might make you feel a little bit, that little tiny bit closer to Britney Spears, especially when you're 11. And all of these kind of things. So the other point of this is that it's not that complicated. You can put the code for the Flash widgets going over the video right into your player renditions. Let me show you that real quick. So for example, this is like a real rendition set for the Kids' Choice Awards. And you can see at the top, this is the 3500, 1280 by 720, whatever. This is our playlist, and when you need bandwidths to go up and down, it looks here. And it says, okay, I'm only getting 1600, and I'm on the 1700. What do I do? And it says, okay, below 17 is 12, so I'm going to use that. Well, right at the bottom here, from here down, is the widget part. Like, these two lines put on all of those social overlays and get all of that working. It works in what's called the alpha channel of Flash. And it literally just goes on above the video. And you know, obviously yours will change a little bit, but it's not that you have to rework your entire website to get this stuff working. You just add some code to the bottom of your playlist, and I mean, obviously you do a little more on the design side. You're not going to get to this just by adding a line in your playlist, but it's not hard to implement. It might be hard to figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it and how you want to design it and get graphic designers to make the buttons, but once you're done doing all that, all you have to do is add a few lines there, and it's pretty easy. All right, let me hurry up because I'm going to run out of questions for you guys. But this is the second most important stuff to the naming convention. Do a dry run the day before. A lot of times people are in a rush. Oh, it's the day before a show. We just changed this thing. I got to run to this meeting, blah, blah. Do a dry run the day before. Because if you don't, your show is going to suck, and you're not going to know why, and you're going to think, what did I plan wrong? You didn't test. That's all it is. There's too many balls in the air for you to remember everything going on, and it changes too quickly. Just test. When planning, leave enough time to adjust bit rates day of the show. You've been planning all week. Your red carpet looks great. You got all these guys. Everything's going great with your 4G card. Everything's awesome. Day of the show, people start showing up. They put up a tent because it might rain. Now your 10 megabits of bandwidth are down to like 2. Your entire show has to change. Maybe you're not doing multi-bit rate anymore, but you need to leave enough time to figure that out. Don't do that at 6 p.m. when the show goes live at 8, but you won't even have a chance to clear caches before something else will go wrong, and you'll be having meetings all night about what happened. Instead of having the meetings about what happened, just leave enough time to fix the bit rates. And lastly, shows go bad when changes are made after everything is working, like our CIO town hall. If you're using cameras, even if they're not the best cameras, or using this, or you made a kludge and it's hanging on by a string, don't break it, because it's hanging on. And breaking it will introduce other things that you didn't have time to think about because you were in a rush to fix the kludge. So leave it alone. It's working. Let it do its thing. It only needs to be up for a few hours probably. Just let it go. Testing was not done with the equipment in the field. We do this all the time. Oh, well, we only wanted to rent that for one day, so we're just not going to test it. Or, you know, whatever. It's Evert's. It'll work. What are you talking about? Well, guess what? It wasn't Evert's fault, but it's not working, and now it's your fault because your show's not going well. So please test with the equipment you're going to use in the field. Don't fake it. Don't lab it. Try it. And lastly, bandwidth was an afterthought. If you are in charge of an event, don't just be like, yeah, we'll just use whatever the venue has. It won't be a problem. You know, oh, they said they had a 5 meg pipe. Okay, well, they said they had a 5 meg pipe. That's great. You don't test because they have a 5 meg pipe and you only need to do 1 meg. What's the difference? How bad could it be, right? I only need to get 20% of my bandwidth. Well, it turns out 3 months ago, the owner dropped that plan and went just with regular DSL and didn't tell any of the staff. So that 5 meg pipe is actually a 768. And if you had gone to the site and done a survey, or at least had somebody there with a laptop doing something, you would have found that out pretty quick. So I think these 5 or 6 or however many you want to call them things are pretty important. And I guess if you had to sum it up, test and make sure everybody's on the same page. Thank you. If we have any questions, Yeah, sure, go ahead.
My name is Marla Schulman, and I came because next week I'm doing a 3-city live stream that has never been done before on Shoestring because it is for charity, transforming the world with comedy. So I have a couple of quick questions because bandwidth was my first question because I have no control over the 2 comedy venues.
Okay, give us 1 second. Can you just grab that mic? It's too much for me to repeat.
My kids tell me. Marla Schulman here. I'm producing a live stream, a 3-city live stream on a shoestring for a transforming the world through comedy.com, TWTC comedy. Anybody here want to buy tickets? It's for a charity, and it's eventually going to be around the world in every time zone. When I came on, the founders were not technical nor producers, and I came in and said, okay, what are we doing? And they said 3 cameras in each city, a TriCaster, blah, blah, blah. We're doing point-to-point in New York and Chicago because we don't have the control, and I'd rather have one good, solid picture.
Right.
The bandwidth in New York is fabulous, LA is fabulous. In Chicago, I've been spending 3 weeks on trying to get a DSL to work, which it barely does. So, actually, that's why I'm here. I found Mushroom as a solution with dongles. I'm going to try to get that pipeline. The other question I have is, because I have limited bandwidth and I don't want to pull off, and this might seem very basic, when you're doing a project, like I remember in the olden days we used to have hardwired PLs or walkie-talkies.
Right.
We're doing 3 cities. What do you use to communicate if you were doing a remote in several cities? And the second question is, what else should I look forward to go wrong other than the signal going down? And I do have a host in Los Angeles waiting, standing by, because Los Angeles is our home base. So is there anything else I can look out for as I plan for this next week?
There's just so many things that could go wrong. It's hard to tell.
I know. I mean,
No,
I feel like I've done all of that. I feel I've done all those things, and I know the bandwidth could go down and all that, but
Yeah.
So the communication device.
As long as you're ready with a good plan B, like if it goes down in New York, what does LA do when it goes down in New York? What does Chicago do when it goes down in New York? Anything?
Yeah,
Maybe
because I came from broadcasting television, and I'm using Stickum. I have a couple of promo reels that'll be up on Stickum.
Cool. All right,
to
so
run.
You have
I've got all the
production
stuff. I'm just talking more on the technical side, and like I said, the communication between cities. I don't want to rob New York and Chicago of their bandwidth to go on Skype, because it's so tenuous as it is.
Right.
So is there any kind of workaround that you know?
There are some things. We have a solution that's more expensive where we embed P&L through Cat5, but why don't I get your card after, and I'll just call up one of our production technologies guys and see if they have any better ideas without any hardware. Sure. Please go ahead. If you're leaving before the question and answer, could you just write all 5s on your survey? That'd be great, thank you.
Hi, could you talk about the pros and cons of sending one really good single bit rate out of your venue to a CDN for transcoding versus sending multiple bit rates out of your venue directly?
Yeah, if you can reliably send out one, let's say 8 meg, the short answer is garbage in, garbage out. If you can get good enough in to the encoder that when it's done destroying it, because it's used to either 270 or 1.5 gig uncompressed signals, and then you're like, just kidding, here's an 8 meg stream. You just need to make sure that 8 meg stream looks really good. Like, it looks as good as you possibly can. It's not interlaced, it's not anything. It's been pre-processed, like crazy. And then certainly do it. I use the gear we have in-house until I run out of spots, and once I'm all out, that's when I usually look at cloud encoding for that kind of stuff. Also, if I want to hit a device I don't usually have a profile for. If Microsoft wants to sponsor something, Microsoft, you're in here, talk to me, we'll sponsor something. I'll use the cloud because they know how to do it. BlackBerry know how to do it. Panasonic television, if there's anything specific I need to know, they know that too. Things like that. But Flash, Android, iPad, iPhone, I've kind of gotten down to the point where I just use existing hardware.
Who are you using for cloud? Because that's why
I'm looking at a bunch of different guys right now. I've been doing a few tests.
Because that's the problem. That's what I'm facing too. Is I'm looking for that.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's almost there. Some people are there, but my stuff's too old. Like an old version of a TriCaster doesn't work right with some of this stuff. So I'm working on it, but yeah,
All right.
that's my new frontier. Yeah. Please go.
4G, do you find that 4G changes even with the same same cable company, that today might be one rate, and tomorrow when you're actually doing it, it's another rate?
Yes, certainly.
And how many do you cover in one? Do you cross over with? How many different brands do you use at one time?
So the question's about 4G cards, and we tend to stick with the Verizon cards for our 4G. I think it was just the ones that we had lying around. Again, this is my personal experience. I'm not trying to promote anything. So we ended up just sticking a few of those in something like a Mushroom or, you know, a Liveview, one of those kind of boxes, and just going that way. There are, of course, I need to run some of those tests is the short answer. When I'm at LA Live, for example, I know Verizon has done a significant hauling of, you know, transmitters and all that kind of stuff across all of LA Live. So if I was doing a show on the red carpet there, I'd probably go Verizon. If I was doing it somewhere else, I'd probably start looking at coverage maps and things along that. Maybe even talk to like a local rep, not a sales guy, but like walk into a store around there and ask them what they get there at that store. Things like that is what we've done in the past. Yes. All right, sounds good. I won't repeat your question then.
Have you ever done a synchronized multiple views back to the client so they can choose what camera they want, and if so,
Yes,
how?
we did that this year for VMAs and last year for KCAs, I want to say. We put all the encoders on the same time clock. And then when they're getting stamped, every frame is stamped with the same thing across, obviously across renditions within a camera, but also across cameras. And so we were able to line up time code and just kind of do it that way. You might have to do it out of band. I don't know, depending on how geographically far apart these encoders are. You might have to, you know, send time code on an RTMP stream that's not a video RTMP stream, but literally just time code. And then everything reads that and syncs to that part. There's a few ways to do it, but it does add a lot of confusion, a lot of intricacies and things like that. So when you're doing multi-camera, that's kind of like when you start over again. You know, we were really good at one camera, and then we got multi-camera, and costs go through the roof, and you have to DA everything, and it becomes a real problem. All right, if that's it, I think we're good. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of your show.